Greetings everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Bite Size History. I'll be your host, Audrey Durham, and in today's episode we are going to be getting into Paleolithic Era history. Now, if you've liked these episodes so far, please go ahead, hit that like button and the subscribe button so you know when I post a new video. And please hit me up on Instagram under Bite Size History with Audrey D. And you can also find me on Patreon if you would like to support this network at Bite Size History with Audrey Durham. All right, guys, let's go ahead and get started. All right, everyone, before we get into today's Paleolithic Era episode, there are a few points I wanted to make about history and the study of history. Now, first off, history is always changing. So regardless of what's been found so far, there may actually be a discovery that happens that could overturn what we consider to be irrefutable theory or evidence. And that being said, this goes double for prehistory. Now, for prehistory and the prehistoric era humans, scientists, archaeologists, and historians are all using different methods in order to better understand how these humans may have lived. One of the research methods is actually to study modern-day hunter-gatherer societies and see how they survive. Now, while this is a way for us to better understand hunter-gatherer societies, there are still things that we don't fully understand and may never understand about prehistory and prehistoric humans. So the Paleolithic era humans created what we call art. And this is one of those theories that may actually be incorrect. Another thing that could be incorrect is what we thought would be religious practices, and they may not have anything to do with a belief structure. So that being said, I want to go ahead and say that I'll be presenting history based on the present historical understanding and evidence that we have so far. And if there's anything that ever needs to be updated, I look forward to being able to create a new episode about that discovery. Starting out, we're going to look at the key terms to know for the Paleolithic era. Now, you may recognize some of these terms if you watched my previous episodes on how history is studied, as well as timeframes in history. I'll put a link at the end of this episode to both of those episodes so you can go back and brush up on how history is studied and some of these key terms. First up, we have BC or BCE, which stands for before Christ and before Common Era. So this is going to be everything that we're talking about today in the Paleolithic times. Starts at prehistory and goes all the way up to 1 BC. AD or CE stands for Anno Domini, meaning in the year of our Lord, talking about the year that they believe Christ was born. And Common Era. So this is AD 1 going all the way forward into present day. A decade is a period of 10 years. A century is a period of 100 years, and a millennium is a period of 1,000 years. An era is a fixed point in time from which a series of years is allocated, and this could be an example of a event time frame such as World War I. So that would be the World War I era based in 1914 all the way up to 1918. Paleolithic means Old Stone Age. 3.3 million to 10,000 years ago would be that time frame. Mesolithic means Middle Stone Age, meso meaning middle, and this ranged from 10,000 to 5,000 years ago. A mammoth is a large, hairy, extinct elephant-like mammal, shown in this image here, that represented one of the varieties of species that Paleolithic man may have hunted. And a hut is a small wooden shed or primitive temporary shelter. shown in this picture here. Now, this is just one representation of how huts might have been built, and there are many other designs that were most likely used by Paleolithic era humans. Next up, we have the Ice Ages. Yeah, Sid, those Ice Ages. So we start out with the Huronian Ice Age, which is from 2.4 to 2.1 billion years ago. Then we go into the Cryogenian Ice Age from 850 to 635 million years ago. Followed by the Andean Saharan Ice Age of 450 to 420 million years ago. The Karoo Ice Age, 360 to 260 million years ago. And finally, our Quaternary Ice Age, which started 2.5 million years ago and goes to present day. So the last glacial period is our primary focus, as this is when early humans began their migrations and the first tools were being made and used. The glacial period is also our present glacial period, known as the Quaternary glacial period. The development of Cro-Magnons, or early humans, depended on the warming of the environment, and due to the climate changes that occurred during the Quaternary glacial period, early humans were able to migrate out of Africa. We're going to look at a migration map here in a little bit. Since around the middle of the Quaternary period, the cooling cycles have had a pattern of roughly every 100,000 years. And according to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Association, glacial periods and the warming at the end of these periods caused the release of carbon dioxide from the oceans, which actually caused an increase in the greenhouse effect, leading to further warming. There are 3 stages of the Paleolithic era. The first is the Lower or Early Paleolithic, which lasted from 2.6 million to 250,000 years ago. This is also the time frame in which tools were first being used and created by early humans. The images that we're looking at right now are of a few artifacts that were most likely used as tools for hunting or processing food. Now, the primary areas these types of tools are found is in Africa, also known as the Cradle of Life, locations where modern-day Tanzania, Ethiopia, Kenya, and South Africa are known for these types of early artifacts, with later finds from 1.7 million years ago being found in Eastern Asia. These later artifacts are classified as being from the Acheulean industry and included axes, picks, and cleavers that spread from Africa to Eurasia. Now, artifacts teach us about the past through creating a potential understanding of how people lived. The arrowheads and spearheads found mean that they were most likely hunters. The grinding stones and other tools help us figure out how early humans lived. This type of translation of found artifacts and art is what has helped to shape how we see history. Nothing can be known about the past because we weren't there. However, based on what we find and based on the interpretations of historians and archaeologists, we may be able to have a little bit more understanding of what life may have been like. The Middle Paleolithic was from 250,000 years ago up to roughly 30,000 years ago. This era saw similar living conditions, which included caves and other natural shelters, such as the ones shown above. However, early humans and Neanderthals began having more separated areas for different activities, as well as hearths and fires becoming common. So in the images, you can see that they do have a fire in their cave. They may also have lived in huts or other temporary shelters, which we can see on the right, while hunting and gathering in one location, and then they would move when the seasons changed. Early humans at this time had started utilizing and controlling fire. Neanderthals were also known for controlling fire, and there's one Neanderthal fire pit that shows evidence of being continuously used for 1,000 years straight. This period also marks the end of the last ice age. Due to the climatic shifts, early humans and Neanderthals began to migrate. Sea level shifted, new areas opened up with new food sources, and this era is when early humans began to show more traditions and differences in tribes by region. We'll be able to discuss lifestyles and food more in depth in an upcoming video as well. All right, and as promised, we have another map. So this map is the migration of early humans out of Central Africa and into the rest of the world. So starting around 200,000 years ago, we have point 1 in Central Africa, which we discussed a little earlier in this episode. This is the migration that began during the Middle Paleolithic Era. Dates vary as to exactly when each location became inhabited. However, from the map, we can see that starting in early Africa, early humans began migrating into North Africa. And then we can see that early humans began to split and go into Europe, and then also all the way down into Southeast Asia and eventually into Australia. And they made it to Southeast Asia and Australia about 50,000 years ago. Europe was 45 to 35,000 years ago. And then we can see that Asia, or Northern Asia, was 45 to 35,000 years ago. And we can also follow our migration all the way into the Americas. So the guesstimation is 20 to 15,000 years ago that people migrated into North America, and then finally making their way all the way down into South America sometime between 15,000 and 12,000 years ago. We have some of the Pacific Islanders, which show around 2,500 years ago, and then we have another group in the Philippines and Southeast Asia around 3,500 years ago. So there are a few different migrations that happened and groups that split off from the originals. And that is one of the things that we can see made some major differences in how these different civilizations developed. The Upper or Late Paleolithic Era. This is when tools became more sophisticated. We have needles that were made from bones or ivory and antler. These might have been used for nets or clothing. We have arrows, spears, harpoons, and other new weapons that were created during this era. Most likely, it changed hunting practices and the way of life for early humans. This era was roughly 50,000 to 10,000 years ago and represents the advancement of humans in hunting and eventually into agriculture. It was during this era that a final glacial episode was to unfold, the Younger Dryas. Around 14,500 years ago, another ice age shift occurred and lasted until 11,500 years ago. This was called the Younger Dryas. Named after a flower that grows in cold climates, shown in our picture here. And with this change came a shift in living conditions and lifestyles once again. While permanent settlements are thought to be something that only occurred during the agricultural revolution, they actually occurred at a few points in prehistory, when humans became dependent on the land and specific types of foods that took a great deal of labor to process. One such type of food was acorns. Women would gather acorns, and similar to some cultures today, they would be the ones to process them, which took several hours of mashing and rinsing to remove the bitter tannins. When climate shifts such as the Younger Dryas occurred, these settlements were uprooted and had once again to become hunter-gatherer nomads, as they followed the warmer seasons to hunt game and collect what they could in edible vegetation. The Younger Dryas ended sometime around 11,500 years ago, and the process of settlements had to begin again. Due to this time gap of settlement loss and no recorded history, generations of knowledge was lost. Practices would have to develop on their own once again to return humans to settlements. Other advancements began to take place around this time, which helped to increase the likelihood of settlements popping up. And that would be the beginning of growing their own food. All right, everyone, that is it for our first episode of Paleolithic Era History. If you have any questions about the Paleolithic Era, please feel free to put those in the comment section below, and I'd be happy to answer them. If you like this episode, please like and subscribe so that you can get those notifications and the next new episode that comes out will be notified to you. If you would like to support this channel, please find me on Patreon under Bite Size History with Audrey Durham, and also make sure to follow me on Instagram under Bite Size History with Audrey D. Thanks for watching, everyone. Have a fantastic day.